The insistent beeping of the heart monitor broke the silence of the pediatric emergency room at Mass General Hospital in Boston. Skylar Bennett pressed on the 3-year-old patient's tiny chest with methodical precision, her eyes fixed on the timer. 15 compressions, 2 ventilations. The ritual continued for an interminable 2 minutes until the child's heart beat at a regular rhythm again. "He's stable," he announced, finally allowing himself to breathe. His hands shook slightly as he wrote down the data in the medical record. After 16 hours on duty, this had been his 3rd successful resuscitation. Rain lashed the hospital windows when Skylar finally left the locker room at 11:45 p.m. Her shift had officially ended at 7 p.m., but one emergency after another kept her tied to her duty. Her cell phone showed 3 unread messages from her younger sister, Madison, reminding her of the family dinner she had missed. Again. Sighing, Skylar opened her ride app. The dynamic fare was crazy due to the storm, but she was too exhausted to care. Her fingers trembled as she typed her address in Beacon Hill, dreaming of her cozy apartment and warm bed. The black sedan was exactly where the app indicated. Skylar ran down the sidewalk, her umbrella already ruined by the wind and folding back. Without thinking twice, she opened the back door and practically dove into the luxurious interior of the vehicle. "Beacon Hill, please. 42 Mount Vernon Street," she said, twisting her sodden ponytail. "Sorry about the water, The words died in his throat when his eyes met the reflection in the rearview mirror. It wasn't the Uber driver staring at her, but a pair of blue-grey eyes that belonged to none other than Maxwell Thorne. The blood drained from Skylar's face. Every Bostonian knew that face from magazine covers and newspaper headlines, the reclusive billionaire who revolutionized medical technology with his innovations at Thorne Technologies. The man who rarely appeared in public, and when he did, created a media frenzy. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," Skylar stuttered, her hand already on the doorknob. "I thought it was my Uber." A flash of lightning cut across the sky, followed by a deafening thunder that made her jump. The rain was now falling in thick sheets, turning the streets into small rivers. "It would be irresponsible to let her go out in this weather," Maxwell said, his voice softer than she expected. "I can take you to your destination." Skylar hesitated. Her rational mind screamed at her to leave immediately, but something in his gaze conveyed a quiet sincerity that made her pause. "I don't want to bother you," she replied, aware that she was soaking the leather seat that probably cost more than her annual salary. "It's no bother at all," he assured, a small smile curving his lips. "It's actually refreshing to meet someone who didn't meticulously plan our date." There was a note of bitterness in his voice that made Skylar look at him more closely. Beneath the mask of professional composure, she noticed a familiar tiredness, the same one she saw in the mirror after long hours in the hospital. "I'm Skylar Bennett," she introduced herself, deciding that if she had already broken into his car, she could at least be polite. "Maxwell Thorne, but I imagine you already know that," he replied, his tone carrying a hint of resignation. "I actually know more about your work than you do about you," Skylar commented, her professional interest momentarily overcoming her embarrassment. "Your latest development in non-invasive cardiac monitoring has saved 3 of my patients this week alone." Maxwell's gaze sharpened with genuine interest. "Are you a doctor?" "Pediatrics resident at Mass General," she confirmed, noting how his posture subtly altered. The conversation flowed naturally as the driver navigated the flooded streets. Skylar was surprised to discover that behind the tech mogul facade was a man passionate about medical innovation and determined to make a difference. When the car stopped abruptly, it was not in front of his building. The street was completely submerged, blocked by safety cones and a police car with flashing lights. "I'm sorry, sir," the driver announced. "All streets to Beacon Hill are blocked due to flooding." Skylar checked her cell phone, realizing there was no signal. The storm had toppled communications towers. "There's a hotel 2 blocks away," Maxwell offered after a moment of silence. "I can arrange a room for you to spend the night." Under any other circumstances, Skylar would have refused, but as she watched the storm battering the city and thought about her inaccessible apartment, she found herself nodding. What she didn't know, as they headed to the hotel, was that night would mark the beginning of a story that neither of them had planned. A story that would prove that sometimes the most meaningful encounters happen at the least expected moments, and that not every invasion is a breach. Sometimes it's just fate opening a door that should have been opened a long time ago. Maxwell watched Skylar in the rearview mirror, intrigued by her unassuming presence and the way she spoke about her work with genuine passion. For the first time in years, he found himself wanting to prolong a conversation, wanting to know more about someone who didn't seem to have an ulterior motive. The storm continued outside, but inside the car, something new was beginning to form, something that neither the most calculating billionaire nor the dedicated resident could have predicted. The lobby of the Four Seasons glowed in gold and amber hues, contrasting sharply with the storm battering Boston outside. Skylar felt out of place as she crossed the marble floor, leaving small puddles of water in her wake, while Maxwell spoke discreetly with the night manager. "I got 2 adjoining rooms on the 10th floor, Maxwell reported, returning with 2 key cards. "I figured you'd feel more comfortable this way." The consideration took her by surprise. In his past experiences with influential people at the hospital, particularly donors and board members, he rarely encountered this kind of sensitivity. "Thank you," she replied, accepting one of the cards. "And I'm sorry again about this whole situation. It's not every day someone breaks into your car." A genuine smile lit up Maxwell's face, softening his usually serious features. "Believe me, I've had far less pleasant intrusions, mostly involving paparazzi or people trying to sell me the next big project." In the elevator, Skylar noticed that her hands were still shaking slightly, a remnant of the adrenaline from the shift or the surreal meeting with Maxwell Thorne. She couldn't say. Her reflection in the elevator mirror revealed how messy she was. Wrinkled coat, soaked sneakers, disheveled hair. "You mentioned saving 3 patients with our technology," Maxwell commented, breaking the silence. "Can I ask about the cases?" Skylar's face instantly lit up. The most recent one was tonight. Noah, 3 years old, developed severe arrhythmia after heart surgery. The monitor detected the change before clinical symptoms even appeared. "What about the others?" "Premature twins last week. The non-invasive system was crucial to monitoring them without additional stress." She hesitated before adding, "Actually, I have some suggestions about the equipment, little tweaks that could—" The elevator stopped on the 10th floor, but Maxwell seemed genuinely interested. "Keep going," he encouraged as they walked down the hallway. For 20 minutes, they stood between their rooms while Skylar explained her clinical observations. Maxwell occasionally asked insightful questions, his eyebrows furrowed in concentration. "That's brilliant," he admitted when she finished. "None of our engineers thought about this adaptation for neonatal use." "Probably because they don't spend 16 hours a day with premature babies," Skylar joked, then yawned involuntarily. "I'm sorry. You must be exhausted." Maxwell backed away, clearly embarrassed at having prolonged the conversation. "No, Another yawn interrupted her. "Okay, maybe a little." "Rest," he smiled. "I'll ask the hotel to provide dry clothes and anything you need." Skylar wanted to protest, to say that she had already caused enough inconvenience, but exhaustion finally caught up with her. "Thank you, Maxwell, for everything." "Max," he corrected softly. "My friends call me Max." "Are we friends now?" "Well, you broke into my car, criticized my technology, and made me rethink an entire project in development. I guess that qualifies us as, at the very least, interesting acquaintances." There was something vulnerable in his tone, as if making friends wasn't common in his world. Skylar could understand. In her own life, genuine relationships were difficult to maintain with the constant demands of the hospital. "Good night, Max," she smiled, entering his room. "Good evening, Dr. Bennett." "Skylar," she corrected, echoing her earlier gesture. "My friends call me Skylar." Alone in the luxurious bedroom, Skylar finally processed the night's surreal events. In less than 2 hours, he had performed cardiac resuscitation, broken into a billionaire's car, and ended up in one of Boston's most exclusive hotels. As he got ready for bed wearing the hotel's soft robe, His cell phone finally picked up a signal. There were dozens of messages from Madison. "Where are you? The police are evacuating some areas of Beacon Hill." "Sky, answer me. Mommy is worried." She quickly reassured the family, omitting the most extraordinary details of the night. "How do you explain that you were staying at the Four Seasons because the CEO of Thorn Technologies found you soaking wet in your car?" In the next room, Maxwell was also awake, mentally reviewing his conversation with Skylar. It was refreshing to meet someone who saw him beyond his wealth, someone who genuinely cared about the impact of his work. Picking up his tablet, he began jotting down notes about her suggestions for the neonatal heart monitor. His fingers stopped on the virtual keyboard when he realized that, for the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about profits or the market. He was thinking about how his creations could save more lives, more Noahs, more premature twins. The storm continued its symphony against the windows, but inside the hotel, something else was brewing. An unexpected connection between two people who, for different reasons, had grown accustomed to keeping the world at arm's length. The night wore on, and in adjacent rooms, both Skylar and Maxwell fell asleep with thoughts of each other, neither suspecting that this accidental meeting was about to change their lives in ways that not even the most sophisticated algorithm could predict. Dawn brought a deceptive calm to Boston. Although the storm had subsided, its consequences were evident in the flooded streets and fallen branches. Skylar woke up to the soft sound of knocking on her door. "Good morning, Dr. Bennett. The hotel has provided some clothes and essential items for you," informed a uniformed employee, pushing a cart with several bags from well-known brands. This is too much," Skylar protested, but the employee was already organizing the bags in her room. Among the pieces were a smart casual clothing set from Nordstrom, top-of-the-line toiletries, and even a pair of flats that, surprisingly, were exactly her size. A handwritten note rested on the bags. "I figured you'd appreciate something dry to wear. Breakfast at 8 a.m. at the hotel restaurant if you're interested. Max." Skylar checked her cell phone, 7:30. His next shift didn't start until 7 p.m., thanks to a rare scheduled day off. Normally, she would use this time to catch up on her sleep, but something compelled her to accept the invitation. After a refreshing shower, Skylar chose a casual navy blue dress and black flats. As she applied some makeup, courtesy of the emergency kit provided, she reflected on how her life had taken such an unexpected turn in less than 24 hours. The hotel restaurant was relatively empty when she arrived. Maxwell was already there, wearing a casual grey sweater that made him look more approachable than the businessman on the magazine covers. He stood up when he saw her approach. "You look a lot more rested," he commented, pulling out the chair for her. "It's surprising what a night's sleep on thread count sheets can do," she joked, then grew serious. "Max, about the clothes. That was very kind, but it wasn't necessary. Please consider a small return for your ideas about the neonatal monitor," he replied, his eyes shining with enthusiasm. "In fact, I spent part of the morning talking to my development team about their suggestions." The waiter appeared to take their orders. Maxwell opted for Eggs Benedict, while Skylar chose blueberry pancakes, a luxury she rarely allowed herself on her morning runs at the hospital. "So how does a pediatric resident end up at Mass General?" Maxwell asked after the waiter left. Skylar hesitated, playing with her napkin. "It's a complicated story," she began. "My youngest sister, Madison, was born with a rare congenital heart condition. We spent a lot of time in hospitals during my childhood. Seeing how the doctors cared for her, how they turned moments of fear into hope, that defined my path. And how is she now? Well, 3 surgeries and a lot of determination later, she's studying dance at Juilliard." Skylar smiled proudly. "But those years shaped who I am. Every child I see a little bit of Madison in them. I see the families going through the same fear we went through." Maxwell watched her intensely, as if each word revealed a new layer of who she was. "Is that why you work so many overtime? How do you know I do this? Your lab coat was wrinkled yesterday, your bag had the remains of at least 2 different snacks, and you mentioned you were supposed to be off at 7 p.m., he listed, then shrugged. "I'm good at observing details." "Impressive," Skylar laughed. But yes, I work a lot of overtime. Every extra minute could mean a life saved. Even if it means missing family dinners, he asked softly, remembering the messages he'd seen on his cell phone the night before. Skylar frowned. It's complicated. My family understands. But do you sometimes wonder if you're missing out on too much of your life while saving someone else's? The comment hit a sensitive nerve. Do you speak from experience? It was Maxwell's turn to hesitate. Let's just say I understand the weight of dedicating your life to something bigger than yourself. Thorn Technologies started with a similar goal to yours, saving lives through technology. But at some point, between board meetings and financial reports, it's easy to lose sight of the original purpose. Is that why you're so reclusive? To stay focused on what really matters? Partially, he admitted. I also learned the hard way that most people only approach you for what they can gain. Money, status, connections. It must be lonely, Skylar commented without thinking, then blushed. Sorry, that was too blunt. It's refreshing, Maxwell smiled. Your honesty. It's different. Breakfast arrived, interrupting the moment of shared vulnerability. As they ate, the conversation flowed naturally between interesting medical cases and future projects at Thorn Technologies. The streets should be clear now, Maxwell commented when they were done. I can arrange a car to take you home. I've caused enough inconvenience, Skylar protested. I can take an Uber. A real one this time, she added with a sly smile. At least allow me to reciprocate the invasion of my car with an invitation, he said, surprising them both. Thorn Technologies is hosting a benefit next weekend. All proceeds will go to pediatric hospitals. Would you like to join me? Skylar felt her heart speed up. Was it a professional invitation or something more? Yes, I'd love to. Excellent, Maxwell smiled, trying to contain his own enthusiasm. I'll send you the details. He paused. That is, if you give me your number. They exchanged contacts with a mixture of nervousness and anticipation that seemed inappropriate for two people so accustomed to high-pressure situations in their respective fields. As he watched Skylar leave in the car he had called for her, Maxwell realized that, for the first time in a long time, he was looking forward to the future. Not for the numbers in the next quarterly report or the launch of a new product, but for the simple possibility of seeing someone again who reminded him of why he started all this. The days that followed the unusual encounter brought a new routine for Skylar. In between her long hours at the hospital, she found herself constantly checking the messages on her cell phone. Max kept in touch regularly, sending interesting articles about medical advances or asking about their day. It was surprising how someone so busy running a tech empire found time for casual conversations about clinical cases and coffee preferences. On Wednesday, during her lunch break, Skylar found an elegant package in her locker at the hospital. Inside was a high-quality umbrella with a simple note. To prevent future car break-ins, although I don't mind yours. Max. So he's the one with all these mysterious gifts? Asked Rachel Chen, her fellow resident peering over her shoulder. First the anonymous donations to the pediatric ward, now this. Skylar frowned. What donations? Didn't you hear? Someone donated new equipment to the NICU. The same ones you keep complaining we need, Rachel explained, arching an eyebrow suggestively. And coincidentally, this happened right after that night of the storm when you disappeared. He wouldn't do that, Skylar murmured, more to herself than to Rachel. But knowing Max, she knew she would, and without fanfare or recognition. During her afternoon round, Skylar noticed the new heart monitors at each bed, including the adaptations she had suggested during that hotel conversation. His heart raced as he realized the tangible impact that a simple conversation had made. His phone buzzed with a message from Max. How's the new gear? You shouldn't have done that, she replied. I don't know what you're talking about, but hypothetically, if someone wanted to implement brilliant suggestions from a dedicated doctor, that would just be good business sense. Skylar smiled at her cell phone, imagining the half-serious, half-amused expression he must have been making. It was impressive how, in such a short time, she was already able to visualize his reactions. "The benefit is in 2 days," he wrote again. "Do I still need to send a car to pick you up?" "I don't know if I should," Skylar hesitated. "People will talk. People always talk. The question is, do you care?" The question caught her off guard. In his professional world, reputation was everything. But there was something more important at stake. The possibility of making a real difference in the lives of his patients through this unexpected connection with Max. "No," she finally replied. "I'm not bothered." On Friday, Skylar was finishing examining her last patient when Madison appeared in the office door, carrying a bag that looked too expensive for a dance student. "Surprise," Madison announced. "I came to help you get ready for the big event." "Like you?" "Max called me." His sister smiled mischievously. "He's much more charming than the magazines show, you know." "Did you guys talk?" Skylar felt a mix of surprise and nervousness. "He wanted to know your dress size," Madison shrugged, pulling a stunning emerald green dress from her bag. "And maybe we talked a little about you, about us, about how you practically lived in the hospital with me when I was little." Skylar felt tears forming. The dress was exactly her style, elegant without being ostentatious, sophisticated but comfortable. "He also told me about the changes he's making at the company," Madison continued, helping Skylar get ready in the small hospital bathroom. "About how his perspective changed after meeting you. Did you know he's redirecting 30% of his research budget to developing pediatric technologies?" As Madison styled her hair into soft waves, Skylar reflected on how her life had changed in a week. It wasn't just the expensive dress or the new equipment, it was the feeling that, for the first time, someone truly understood her motivations, her sacrifices. "Ready," Madison declared, spinning Skylar toward the mirror. The woman staring back at her looked like something out of a modern fairy tale. Not a princess waiting to be saved, but a confident professional who saved lives every day. The soft sound of knocking on the door interrupted them. Max stood in the doorway, impeccable in his tuxedo, his eyes fixed on Skylar, as if the rest of the world had disappeared. "You look stunning," he said simply. Madison discreetly said goodbye, winking at her sister before leaving. In the hospital hallway, where Skylar had spent countless hours caring for patients, she and Max found themselves in a moment of crystal clarity. "Thank you," Skylar said softly, "not just for the dress or the equipment, but for seeing value in what I do." "It's easy to see value in someone who puts so much love into their work," Max replied, offering his arm. "Ready to show the world of philanthropy how medicine really works?" Skylar smiled, linking her arm with his. "Ready for anything." As they walked out of the hospital, they both knew they were embarking on something bigger than a simple charity event. It was the beginning of a partnership that could transform not just their lives, but the lives of countless children who needed hope. The ballroom of the Boston Harbor Hotel glowed with its characteristic opulence. Hundreds of floating candles danced in crystal arrangements, creating an ethereal atmosphere that was reflected in the huge windows overlooking the harbor. Among the guests in formal attire, Skylar took in the room with a mixture of awe and discomfort. "Breathe," Max whispered, his hand resting lightly on her back. "They're just people. People who probably donate more money in a day than I make in a year," she murmured, accepting a glass of champagne from a passing waiter. "And none of them saved 3 lives this week alone," he replied with a small smile. "Come on, I want you to meet some people." Max guided her through the room with a natural grace that made it seem like she belonged there. At each stop, he introduced her, not just as his companion, but as the brilliant resident who had inspired Thorne Technologies' latest innovations in pediatric technology. Dr. Bennett, an elegant woman in her 50s, approached. "I'm Catherine Blackwell, head of the board of directors at Boston Children's Hospital. Maxwell told us about her ideas for the neonatal heart monitoring program." "It's an honor to meet you, Dr. Blackwell," Skylar replied, feeling more in her element when discussing medicine. "Your hospital's pioneering work in congenital heart surgery is inspiring. Please call me Catherine. In fact, I was hoping to discuss with you some possibilities for collaboration between our hospitals. The conversation naturally flowed into medical matters, and Skylar found herself completely engrossed in a discussion about treatment protocols and new technologies. Max watched with obvious satisfaction, occasionally interjecting with technical perspectives that demonstrated his deep knowledge of the subject. "Impressive," he commented when Catherine finally pulled away. "You've just secured a partnership we've been trying to establish for months." "I just talked about my work." Skylar shrugged, but couldn't hide her smile. "Exactly. Your passion is contagious," Max said, his eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her heart race. The orchestra began to play a gentle waltz, and Max extended his hand in silent invitation. Skylar hesitated for a moment, then allowed him to lead her to the dance floor. "I should warn you that my dancing skills are limited to swaying from side to side during proms," she joked. "Lucky for you, I've had years of forced ballroom dancing lessons," he replied, pulling her closer. "Just follow me." Their proximity created a bubble of intimacy in the crowded room. Skylar could feel the warmth of his hand on her back, the faint scent of his cologne, the firmness with which he guided her through the dance steps. "Can I make a confession?" Max asked softly. "I've been looking forward to this moment all week." "The benefit?" "No," he smiled. "This moment. With you." Skylar felt her face heat up. "Even with all the car break-ins and criticisms of your equipment." "Especially because of them," he laughed softly. "You're different, Skylar. Refreshing. Real." The music changed to something slower, but they continued dancing, now closer. Skylar could feel the curious stares of the other guests, but for the first time all night, she didn't care. "Do you know what I like most about you?" she allowed herself to say. "How you listen. Not just the words, but the intentions behind them. How you turned a casual suggestion into a life-saving donation." "It's easy to listen when someone has something important to say," he replied, his eyes meeting hers. "It's even easier to act when you see the real impact it can have." A sudden movement near the entrance to the room caught both their attention. Photographers jostled, their flashlights blinking incessantly. "Damn," Max muttered, instinctively moving Skylar away from the prying eyes. "I am really sorry about that." "It's okay," she assured him, even though her heart was beating fast. "It's part of your world, isn't it?" "A world I would rather keep from you," he admitted, guiding her to a terrace adjacent to the hall. The night air was cool, and the view of Boston Harbor sparkled with lights reflecting off the water. Skylar leaned against the railing, allowing the gentle breeze to calm her nervousness. "You can't protect me from everything, Max," she said softly. "Just like I can't save all my patients, no matter how hard I try." He joined her on the railing, their shoulders touching lightly. "How do you deal with this? With the impossibility of controlling everything?" "Focusing on what I can do, not what's beyond my reach," she replied, turning to face him, "and meeting people who make the journey more meaningful." The moment between them was charged with unspoken possibilities. Max raised his hand, gently touching Skylar's face with a gentleness that contrasted with his usual controlled posture. "Skylar, The sound of its beeping cut through the air, making her jump. It was the hospital's emergency code. "It's Noah," she said, checking the message with shaking hands. "He's having post-operative complications." "I'll get my driver," Max responded immediately, understanding the urgency of the situation. "No need to ruin your night," Skylar protested, but he was already guiding her off the terrace. "My night was already perfect," he assured, helping her into the car that magically appeared within minutes. "Go save lives. It's what you do best." As the car snaked through the streets of Boston toward the hospital, Skylar found herself smiling despite the tension of the emergency, because for the first time he had found someone who not only understood his priorities, but admired them, and that, more than any dance or glamorous event, was truly extraordinary. The heart monitor beeped regularly as Skylar watched Noah, now stable after 3 hours of intensive intervention. Her small hands, previously cold and bluish, had regained their natural pink tone. She adjusted the blanket over him, allowing herself to finally relax. "How is he?" asked Dr. Harrison, the chief cardiac surgeon, entering the ICU. "Responding well to medication. The new monitoring system detected the arrhythmia before it progressed to cardiac arrest," Skylar replied, unable to keep the pride in her voice. "Impressive," he commented, examining the data on the monitor. "This equipment from Thorn Technologies is revolutionary. I heard you had something to do with the latest upgrades." Skylar felt her face heat up. "Just some suggestions based on clinical experience." "Well, your just a few suggestions just saved this little boy's life," Dr. Harrison smiled. "By the way, there's someone waiting for you in the doctor's lounge. It's been 2 hours. His heart skipped a beat. Walking through the hall, still dressed in her glamorous emerald green gown, now covered by a hospital gown, Skylar found Max sitting on the worn couch in the doctor's lounge, his impeccable tuxedo contrasting with the utilitarian surroundings. "You were," she said, surprised. "Of course I was," he replied, standing up. "How's Noah?" "Stable. The monitor, your monitor, detected the complication in time," she explained, feeling the fatigue finally weighing down on her shoulders. Max approached, his eyes studying your face with concern. "You're exhausted." "I'm fine," she tried to smile, but her legs were shaking slightly. Without saying anything, he guided her to the sofa, sitting next to her. The silence between them was comfortable, full of mutual understanding. "You know," he began after a moment, "when I started Thorn Technologies, my goal was to create technology that could save lives. But somewhere between financial reports and shareholder meetings, that purpose became hazy." Skylar watched him, noticing the vulnerability in his usually controlled expression. "And then you break into my car," he continued, a soft smile curving his lips, "all soaked and determined, talking about your patients with so much love and dedication. And suddenly, I remember why I started all this." "Max," she started, but he gently placed a finger on her lips. "Let me finish," he requested. "Seeing you today, running from the most important party of the Boston social year to save a patient, still wearing this stunning dress under your lab coat, I realized something." "What?" she asked, her heart racing. "That I want to be a part of this, not just providing equipment or making donations. I want to be there for you, supporting your work, sharing your victories and defeats." The intensity of his words left her breathless. "My life isn't glamorous, Max. There are endless shifts, emergencies in the middle of the night, missed dinners. And that's exactly why it's perfect," he added, "because it's real, because it matters." The moment was interrupted by the sound of footsteps in the hallway. Rachel appeared in the doorway, stopping abruptly upon seeing the scene. "Oh, sorry," she stammered. "I just wanted to let you know that Noah's parents are here." "Thank you, Rachel," Skylar replied, reluctantly standing up. "I need to go talk to them." "I'm going with you," Max decided, surprising her. Together, they walked to the waiting room, where Noah's parents waited anxiously. Upon seeing Skylar, the boy's mother ran to hug her. "Dr. Bennett, thank you," she sobbed. "Dr. Harrison told us how you and the new equipment saved our son." "Actually," Skylar said, looking at Max, "you guys should thank Mr. Thorn. It was his technology that made the difference." The parents' eyes widened as they recognized Max, who quickly deflected the credit back to Skylar and the medical team. After reassuring her parents and giving Noah one last check, Skylar finally allowed Max to take her home. In the car, she rested her head on his shoulder, the exhaustion and adrenaline of the night finally taking its toll. "I'm sorry I ruined your party," she mumbled sleepily. "You didn't ruin anything," he replied, gently kissing her forehead. "Actually, tonight was perfect. We managed to save a life, we danced, and I finally had the courage to say how I feel." "And how do you feel?" she asked, fighting sleep. "Like I found something I didn't know I was looking for," he replied softly. "Someone who makes me want to be a better version of myself." Skylar smiled, her eyes closing against her will. "That's good," she murmured. Because I'm kind of falling in love with you too. Max watched her fall asleep, his heart overflowing with an emotion he hadn't felt in years. There, in his luxury car, with an exhausted doctor wearing a formal gown under a hospital gown sleeping on his shoulder, he realized he had found his true purpose. And this time, it had nothing to do with technology or billions of dollars. It had to do with love, dedication, and the courage to make a difference in people's lives. It had to do with Skylar Bennett and everything she represented. The morning sun filtered through the curtains of Skylar's apartment when she woke up, still wearing her dress from the night before. For a moment she was disoriented, until memories of the night started coming back. The fundraiser, the emergency with Noah and Max. His cell phone vibrated with a message from him. "Good morning. Coffee?" Skylar smiled, quickly typing an affirmative response. 15 minutes later, the doorbell rang. Max was standing at her door, holding a tray of coffee from L.A. Burdick, her favorite hot chocolate that she had casually mentioned during one of their conversations. "How did you know I'd need this?" she asked, accepting the aromatic drink. "Intuition," he replied with a smile, entering the apartment. Her eyes roamed the welcoming space, noting the details that revealed Skylar's personality. Medical books stacked next to worn romance novels, a colorful blanket Madison had knitted, photos of family and recovered patients. "It's smaller than your closet, probably," she joked, aware of the simplicity of her home. "It's perfect," Max replied sincerely. "And you?" They sat on the comfortable couch, a natural closeness between them that hadn't existed 24 hours before. Max took something out of his coat pocket, an envelope. "What is this?" Skylar asked, curious. "A proposal," he replied, handing her the envelope. "Thorne Technologies is beginning a pediatric technology research program. We want consulting physicians who can guide us in developing more efficient equipment." Skylar opened the envelope, her eyes widening as she read the document. "Max, that's amazing, but I can't accept it." "Why not?" "Because—" She hesitated, organizing her thoughts. "Because I don't want people to think I'm taking advantage of our connection." Max leaned forward, his eyes intensely focused on her. "Skylar, you were saving lives with brilliant ideas long before you met me. This invitation is purely professional, based on your merit as a doctor." "What about us?" she asked softly. "How would that affect what's going on between us?" "They are separate spheres," he assured. "In the company, you would be Dr. Bennett, the medical consultant. Outside of it—" He took her hand, intertwining their fingers. "Outside of it, it's just Max and Skylar, figuring this out together." Skylar's phone rang, interrupting the moment. It was Madison. "Oh my God, Sky! You're all over social media! Mysterious tech billionaire finds love with dedicated resident doctor," Madison read, clearly excited. Skylar put the phone on speaker, allowing Max to listen as well. "Maddie, it's not like that." "Oh no? Then explain the photos of you dancing, and then you running out of the party still in your evening dress to save a patient, with him following you like a modern prince." Max laughed, amused by Madison's enthusiasm. "Your sister is right, Skylar, except you're more hero than damsel in this story." "Is that Max? Are you guys together now?" Madison squealed on the other end of the line. "Maddie, I need to hang up," Skylar interrupted, her face red. "I'll call you later." After ending the call, a contemplative silence fell over them. Max absent-mindedly played with Skylar's fingers, as if he was organizing his thoughts. "You know," he began, "I spent years building walls around myself, keeping people at a distance because I assumed they all wanted something from me. And now I've found someone who broke down those walls without even trying," he smiled. "Someone who cares more about saving lives than tabloid headlines." "Speaking of saving lives," Skylar bit her lip, looking back at the proposal, "about this research program. Try? What if I accepted, but on one condition?" Max's eyes sparkled with interest. What would it be? "That part of the budget should be allocated to taking this technology to public hospitals and needy communities," she proposed. "Places that normally can't afford high-end equipment." Max watched her with growing admiration. Even though he had access to unlimited resources through him, His first concern was still with those who needed it most. "Consider it done," he replied without hesitation. "In fact, why don't we expand this? We can create a foundation dedicated specifically to this purpose." Skylar stared at him, surprised by the quickness of his response. "Would you do that? For you? For these children?" "I would do so much more," he assured, leaning down to kiss her forehead softly. The moment was interrupted by the familiar beeping of the hospital. Skylar checked the message, a smile lighting up her face. "Noah's awake," she announced, "and your vitals are perfect." "Do you want to go visit him?" Max asked, already knowing the answer. "Don't you have meetings or something?" "Nothing that can't wait," he smiled, standing up and extending his hand to her. "Besides, I want to personally see how our equipment is working." As they walked out of the apartment, Skylar realized that something fundamental had changed. It wasn't just the start of a relationship or a professional opportunity. It was the start of a partnership that could truly make a difference in the world. And maybe, she thought as Max laced his fingers through hers, sometimes modern fairy tales weren't about being rescued, but about finding someone who shared her mission to rescue others. The following weeks brought a new routine to Mass General Hospital. Thorne Technologies' research program began to take shape, with Skylar leading a select group of resident physicians who provided direct feedback on the practical needs of modern pediatrics. Max, in turn, became an increasingly familiar presence in the hospital hallways, always finding excuses for follow-up meetings that coincidentally took place during Skylar's breaks. "You know you don't need to invent excuses to see me, right?" she teased one afternoon as they shared a sandwich in the hospital cafeteria. "Who said they were pretexts?" Max replied with false innocence. "I'm genuinely interested in how the new monitoring system is working in the neonatal ward." At 3 in the afternoon, which coincidentally is always my break time. Max smiled. That rare smile she was learning was reserved just for her. "Perhaps I would enjoy the company of my primary medical consultant." The moment was interrupted when Rachel hurriedly approached the table. "Sky, we need you at the emergency. School bus accident." Skylar stood up immediately, her medical instincts taking over. To his surprise, Max also stood up. "How can I help?" he asked, his tone changing to that of a solutions-focused executive. "Max, you don't need to—" "Skylar," he interrupted her gently, "if there's anything Thorne Technologies can do to help these kids, I want to know." Over the next few minutes, the organized chaos of the pediatric emergency room sprang into action. 12 children were admitted with varying degrees of injuries. Max watched, impressed, as Skylar completely transformed, her soft posture giving way to precise clinical efficiency. "I need a portable ultrasound in bed 3, she commanded, examining a 7-year-old girl with possible internal bleeding. "The available equipment is all in use," a nurse reported. "Use the prototype," Max intervened, already on the phone with his team. "I have 3 units of the new ultrasound model arriving in 15 minutes. Skylar gave him a grateful look before turning her attention back to the patient. Over the next few hours, Max witnessed firsthand how his technology, in the right hands, could make the difference between life and death. "All the kids are stable," Skylar finally announced, collapsing into a chair in the doctor's room hours later. His face showed exhaustion, but his eyes shone with the satisfaction of a job well done. "You were amazing," Max said, sitting down next to her and offering her a cup of coffee. "Seeing you work is inspiring." "It's teamwork," she corrected, "and having the right resources makes all the difference. Those ultrasounds saved lives today." "How about we make this something permanent?" Max suggested, his mind already working on possibilities. "We can establish a rapid response program for pediatric emergencies, equipping public hospitals with cutting-edge technology." Skylar stared at him, noticing how he had changed since their first meeting. The businessman focused exclusively on financial results was giving way to someone who saw beyond the numbers. "Why are you looking at me like that?" he asked, noticing her contemplative expression. "I'm just proud," she admitted. "How you're using your power to make a real difference. You showed me that there's more to life than financial statements," Max replied, taking her hand. Much more. At that moment, Madison appeared in the doorway carrying several bags. I brought food. I figured you guys would be hungry after— Oh, sorry, am I interrupting something? Never, Skylar smiled, making room for her sister. How did you hear about the accident? It's all over the news, Madison explained, handing out containers of Thai food. Tech Millionaire provides emergency equipment to save children. Mom is super proud, by the way. Max seemed uncomfortable with the attention. The story should be about the medical team, not me. And that's why you're different from other billionaires, Madison declared. Now, who wants pad Thai? As they shared the impromptu meal, Skylar observed how naturally Max interacted with Madison, laughing at her jokes and showing genuine interest in her stories about dance school. He had become part of her life in such an organic way that it was hard to remember what it was like before him. I have an idea, Max suddenly announced. What do you think about a weekend on Martha's Vineyard? My family has a house there, and after today, we all deserve a break. I'd love to, Madison replied enthusiastically, but I have a performance next weekend. And I have a shift, Skylar began, but Max interrupted her. Actually, I already checked your schedule. You're off next weekend, he revealed with a mischievous smile. Have you been spying on my schedule, Mr. Thorne? Just being strategic, Dr. Bennett, he replied, leaning down to kiss her forehead. Madison feigned nausea, but her smile was genuine. You two are disgustingly cute together. Watching the two interact, Skylar felt a rush of gratitude. Amid the chaos of medical emergencies and technological development, she had found something precious, a partner who not only understood her dedication to her work, but supported her and amplified her impact. And as the night wore on in the now calmer hospital, the three continued sharing Thai food and laughter, creating a moment of normalcy in their extraordinary lives. The late afternoon sun bathed Martha's Vineyard in golden hues as Max's private helicopter touched down on the Thorne estate. Skylar watched through the window, still adjusting to the idea that this would be her first weekend truly away from the hospital since starting her residency. Welcome to the family summer home, Max said, helping her out of the helicopter. The house was actually an oceanfront mansion with traditional New England architecture, its French windows reflecting the light of the ocean. This is surreal, Skylar murmured, adjusting the strap of her small suitcase. Does your family come here a lot? A shadow passed over Max's face. Not anymore. Since my parents passed away 5 years ago, I've been avoiding coming. Too many memories. Skylar squeezed his hand gently, understanding the significance of him bringing her to this very personal place. As they walked around the property, Max began to open up about his childhood, summers spent swimming with his father, nights stargazing with his mother on the deck. This is where I decided to create Thorne Technologies, he revealed, guiding her to a balcony overlooking the ocean. My father was battling aggressive cancer, and the equipment available at the time was limited. I promised him I would change that. And you've changed, Skylar assured, thinking of all the lives saved by her innovations. The housekeeper, Mrs. Peterson, a grey-haired lady who had worked for the family for decades, welcomed them with dinner prepared on the porch. As they enjoyed fresh lobster and white wine, Max continued sharing stories of his life before fame and fortune. Do you know what I miss most? He asked, playing with his glass. Of simplicity, before the board meetings, the expectations, the fake smiles and hidden agendas. Is that why you became a recluse? Partially, he admitted, but also because I got tired of people approaching you just for what they could get. Until you showed up, soaked and determined, in my car. Skylar laughed, remembering that fateful night. I still can't believe I broke into your car. Best invasion of my life, he smiled, leaning down to kiss her softly. After dinner, they walked barefoot along the private beach. The night was clear, with thousands of stars dotting the summer sky. Max stopped abruptly, turning to Skylar with a serious expression. I want to show you something, he said, guiding her back into the house and through a hallway to a room that looked like an old office. This was my father's office, he explained, turning on the lights. The walls were covered in blueprints and prototypes of Thorn Technologies' early equipment. "And this," he continued, picking up a dusty folder, "is the project we were working on when he got sick." Schuyler examined the drawings with professional interest. These were preliminary sketches of a revolutionary diagnostic imaging system, decades ahead of its time. "Max, this is extraordinary," she whispered, realizing the project's potential. "Why was it never developed?" "After he passed away, I dove into more commercially viable projects," Max admitted. "But ever since I met you, I've been thinking about taking it back, with its adaptations for pediatric use, of course." Schuyler's heart raced at the possibilities. "We could revolutionize early diagnosis in children, reduce the need for invasive procedures, improve monitoring of congenital conditions." "Exactly," Max smiled, delighted by her enthusiasm. "And I want you to lead the medical project." "Me?" Schuyler looked at him, surprised. "Max, there are much more experienced doctors." "But none with your passion and vision," he interrupted gently. "Furthermore, you have already proven yourself time and time again. The success of the Rapid Response Program is proof of that." Schuyler thought about the kids in the bus accident, about Noah, about the countless lives that could be impacted by this technology. "When do we start?" Max laughed, pulling her into his arms. "First thing Monday. But for now," he kissed her forehead, "this weekend is just ours." Later, lying in a hammock on the porch, lulled by the sound of the waves, Schuyler realized how drastically her life had changed in just a few weeks. It wasn't just the relationship with Max or the professional opportunities. It was the feeling that he had finally found someone who shared his vision of making a difference in the world. "What are you thinking about?" Max asked softly, noticing your contemplative silence. "How sometimes the best dates happen at the least planned moments," she replied, snuggling closer to him. "How a rainy night and a broken umbrella can change everything." "Speaking of changes," Max began hesitantly, "I've been thinking about turning this house into a research and development center for pediatric projects, a place where doctors and engineers can work together, away from corporate pressures." Schuyler lifted her head to look at him, thrilled by the idea. "Your parents would be proud," she said softly. "I hope so," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. "And I hope you'll be by my side as we make this dream a reality." News of the new research center on Martha's Vineyard spread quickly throughout the Boston medical community. In a matter of days, the Thorn home was transformed into a construction site, with crews working to convert the spaces into state-of-the-art laboratories while keeping the historic architecture intact. Schuyler watched the changes with a mixture of wonder and nostalgia. Max's father's office had been preserved as a kind of memorial, but the rest of the house was being adapted for its new role. The former guest suites now housed workstations equipped with cutting-edge technology, while the formal dining room was transformed into a conference room with ocean views. "What do you think?" Max asked, meeting her on the porch after a meeting with the architects. "The main labs will be ready in 2 weeks." "It's amazing," she replied, turning to face him. "But how did you get approval so quickly for a medical center in a residential area?" Max smiled, that smile she was learning to associate with her strategic connections. "Let's just say the city council was very interested when I mentioned the economic and medical benefits to the local community. And the fact that you donated a new playground to the city had nothing to do with it?" she teased, having read about the donation in the local newspaper. "Mere coincidence," he replied innocently, pulling her into his arms. "How's Noah?" "He was discharged yesterday," Schuyler smiled, remembering the joy of the boy's parents. "The new monitoring protocol worked perfectly. Dr. Harrison is talking about implementing it in all pediatric cardiac cases." "You should be proud," Max said softly. "It was your idea from the beginning." "Our idea," she corrected. "You turned a casual suggestion into reality." The moment was interrupted by the sound of approaching helicopters. Rachel and a small team of selected resident physicians arrived for a workshop on the new equipment. "Dr. Bennett!" Rachel exclaimed as she disembarked, her hair tousled by the wind from the propellers. This place is amazing. What about that diagnostic imaging system you talked about? In the East Wing, Max replied, naturally taking on the role of host. Skylar can show you around. I have some connections to make, but shall we meet for lunch? As she guided her colleagues through the center, Skylar couldn't help but notice the admiring looks they exchanged. For young doctors accustomed to outdated equipment and limited budgets, it was a dream come true. How can you handle all this? Rachel asked when they were alone, after demonstrating the equipment. The relationship with Max, the project, the residents. Honestly, sometimes I wonder if I'm going to wake up and find out it was all a dream, Skylar admitted. But then I remember the lives we can save with this work, and it all makes sense. And Max? How is he dealing with all this change in his life? Skylar smiled, thinking about how he had transformed in the last few weeks. The reclusive businessman now actively participated in hospital rounds, discussed cases with residents, and genuinely cared about every little progress. He found a new purpose, she replied simply. Just like me. Lunch was served on the deck, with a spectacular view of the ocean. Max had organized a casual buffet, allowing the medical team to feel comfortable discussing ideas and projects. I have an announcement, he said when everyone had finished eating. Thorne Technologies is establishing a research fellowship program for residents interested in pediatric medical technology development. Dr. Bennett will be the program coordinator. Skylar choked on her water. What? Max, you didn't mention anything about that. Because I wanted it to be a surprise, he smiled. You've already proven your ability to lead and inspire other doctors. This is just the next logical step. As the afternoon progressed and residents returned to Boston, Skylar remained on the deck, taking in everything that had happened. Max found her there, watching the sunset. You're quiet, he commented, sitting down next to you. Just processing, she replied. Max, are you sure about making me the coordinator? I'm still just a resident. A resident who revolutionized our cardiac monitoring program, established life-saving protocols, and inspires other doctors to think outside the box, he argued. Besides, you have something that can't be taught, genuine compassion. Skylar felt tears forming in her eyes. Sometimes I wonder how this all happened so quickly, how a broken umbrella completely changed our lives. It wasn't the umbrella, Max smiled, holding his hand. It was you. Your passion, your dedication, your ability to see beyond appearances. You made me remember why I started all of this in the first place. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. There, in that perfect moment, Skylar realized that she had found much more than a relationship or a professional opportunity. I had found a shared purpose, a chance to make a difference in the world in ways I had never imagined possible. And as Max pulled her closer, kissing her softly against the burning sky, she knew this was just the beginning of something extraordinary. Autumn has arrived in Boston, bringing renewed energy to Mass General Hospital. The hallways now displayed signs advertising the Thorne Technologies Research Grant Program, and the Research Center on Martha's Vineyard was officially operational. Skylar divided her time between on-call shifts, mentoring residents, and developing protocols for the new diagnostic imaging system. One particularly busy morning, she found a surprise in her locker, a framed photo of Noah, smiling and holding a sign that said, "Thank you for saving my life." Enclosed was a note from Max. "I thought you might like a reminder of why we do this." "You two are terribly romantic," Rachel commented, appearing behind her. "But I have to admit, I've never seen pediatrics so well equipped. That new ultrasound system saved 3 babies this week alone." Before Skylar could respond, her phone rang. It was Madison, sounding agitated. "Sky, you need to see this. Forbes magazine ran a story about Max and the research center. They're calling it The Quiet Revolution in Pediatric Medicine." Skylar quickly accessed the article online. The report detailed how Maxwell Thorne had transformed his company, redirecting significant resources to pediatric research and development of affordable technologies. A photo showed Max at the research center, explaining how the new diagnostic system works to a group of doctors. "But the best part," Madison continued, is when they talk about you. There's a whole section about how a young resident doctor inspired this change in direction. What? Skylar felt her face heat up. But I didn't give any interviews. Apparently Max did. He gave you all the credit for inspiring the project. At that moment, Dr. Harrison appeared at the locker room door. Dr. Bennett, do you have a minute? We need to discuss something important. In the Chief of Surgery's office, Skylar encountered not only Dr. Harrison, but also Dr. Skylar, Catherine began with a warm smile. We read the Forbes story. But more importantly, we have been closely following the results of your work with Thorne Technologies. Survival rates in complex cardiac cases have increased by 37% since implementation of the new protocols, Dr. Harrison added, and the scholarship program is attracting exceptional talent. Which brings us to the reason for this meeting, Catherine continued. We are proposing a partnership between Mass General, Boston Children's and the Research Center. We want to expand the program, create a pediatric innovation corridor between the hospitals. Skylar felt her heart race at the possibilities. That would mean wider access to technology, specialized training for more residents, and most importantly, more lives saved, Dr. Harrison added. Of course, we'd need someone to coordinate all of this, Catherine smiled suggestively. Someone who understands both the medical and technological sides. But I'm still a resident, Skylar protested, though her heart was already racing at the possibility. A resident who revolutionized our approach to pediatric medicine in a matter of months, Dr. Harrison argued. Plus, you have already proven your leadership capabilities with the scholarship program. When Skylar finally left the office, her head was spinning with the implications of the proposal. In the hallway, she found Max waiting for her. Did you know about this? She asked, noticing his knowing smile. About the meeting? Yes. About their decision? No. But I'm not surprised, he replied, pulling her into a hug. You are extraordinary, Skylar. It was only a matter of time before others realized it too. But what if I'm not ready? Remember when you broke into my car that night? Max asked, making her laugh. You weren't ready for that either, but look where you got us. That evening, walking along Beacon Hill after a quiet dinner, Skylar and Max discussed the details of their proposed partnership. Do you know what impresses me most about you? Max said suddenly. How you never lost your original purpose. While I got lost in numbers and reports, you kept your focus on what really matters, saving lives. You also saved lives, she argued. Each piece of equipment, each innovation. But I had forgotten the human face of it all, he interrupted her gently. You reminded me that behind every technological advancement, there is a child like Noah, a family waiting for hope. Stopping under a street lamp, Max held Skylar's hands in his. And that's why I know you're the right person to lead this project, because you never forget what really matters. The sound of their simultaneous beeps broke the moment. An emergency at the hospital called them both back to the reality of their lives, intertwined between medicine and technology. Ready to save some more lives? Max smiled, already calling his driver. Always, Skylar replied, feeling that familiar mix of adrenaline and purpose that now defined not only her career, but her relationship with Max. As they rushed back to the hospital, Skylar reflected on how a rainy night and a broken umbrella had changed not only their lives, but potentially the lives of countless children who would benefit from this new era of medical innovation. The research center on Martha's Vineyard was buzzing with activity one October morning. Resident physicians from across the country had arrived for the fellowship program's first official symposium, transforming the former Thorne home into a vibrant center of medical innovation. Skylar watched the bustle of her new office, formerly the home's sunroom, as she reviewed the day's presentations. Coffee? Max asked, entering the room with 2 steaming cups of L.A. Burdick. You barely slept yesterday. I was finalizing the protocol for the multi-center study, she explained, accepting the drink gratefully, and I may have spent a few extra hours reviewing the cases for today's presentation. Perfectionist, he teased affectionately, sitting on the edge of his desk. How's Noah? Surprisingly well. The latest scans showed a complete recovery. Skylar smiled, pulling out a recent photo of the boy she kept on her desk. "He wants to be a doctor now. His parents said he spends all day with a toy stethoscope." "Following in Dr. Bennett's footsteps," Max commented, his eyes shining with pride. "Speaking of which, I saw the preliminary numbers from the hospital partnership program. The results are impressive." Before Skylar could respond, Rachel hurried into the office. "Sky, you need to see this. The Johns Hopkins team just arrived with an incredible case to present." The three headed to the makeshift auditorium, where a young Hopkins doctor was presenting the case of conjoined twins with a complex heart condition. The images from the new diagnostic system showed details that would be impossible to visualize with conventional equipment. "With this technology," the doctor explained, "we can plan the separation surgery with unprecedented precision. The estimated success rate has increased from 45% to 78%. Skylar felt Max's hand squeeze hers discreetly. They knew that each percentage represented a life, a family, a story of hope. During the symposium break, Madison showed up carrying a basket of homemade muffins, her new passion besides dancing. "I thought you workaholics could use some energy," she announced, distributing the sweets among the doctors. "How's Juilliard?" Max asked, genuinely interested. Over the past few months, he had practically become part of the Bennett family. "Intense," Madison replied, sitting with them in a corner of the deck. "But inspiring. I'm actually choreographing a piece about healing and hope, inspired by your work here." "Maddie, that's amazing," Skylar exclaimed, hugging her sister. "Well, you two gave me plenty of material to work with," Madison smiled. "The main dance is about a dedicated doctor who meets a reclusive businessman, and together they revolutionize pediatric medicine." "Nothing cliché," Max joked, but his smile was soft. The afternoon brought more impressive presentations, including a case study from Boston Children's on how the new monitoring program had reduced diagnosis time in pediatric cardiac emergencies by 60%. "It's surreal," Skylar commented when they were finally alone in her office at the end of the day. "To think this all started with a casual conversation about equipment during a storm." "Nothing about that night was random," Max replied, pulling her into his arms. "You literally invaded my life and completely transformed it." "For the better, I hope," she teased. "Much better," he assured, kissing her softly. "Actually, I have something to show you." Max guided her to her father's old office, now preserved as a memorial. But there was something new on the wall, a framed photo of Skylar with Noah and their family, next to the original blueprints of the diagnostic system. "To remember where it all started," Max explained, "and why we keep doing this." Skylar felt tears forming in her eyes. "Your parents would be proud, Max. The center, the scholarship program, how you're using the company to make a difference." "They would have loved you," he said softly. "Especially my mother. She always said that true innovation comes from the heart, not just the mind." The sound of laughter and music floated through the windows. Residents had organized a small celebration on the deck to celebrate the success of the symposium. Madison was out there, probably regaling everyone with embarrassing stories about her sister. "Should we join them?" Skylar asked, although she was reluctant to leave this intimate moment. "In a minute," Max replied, still holding her hand. "First, I want to thank you." "For what?" "For reminding me that there is more to life than financial statements and quarterly reports. For showing me that sometimes the most meaningful encounters happen in the least planned moments." Together, they went out to join the celebration, where young doctors exchanged experiences and dreams of revolutionizing pediatric medicine. The sun set over Martha's Vineyard, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, as a new generation of medical innovators was inspired by the unlikely love story between a dedicated resident and a billionaire who rediscovered his purpose. And in the midst of it all, Skylar and Max shared a look that said more than words, the certainty that together they were creating something much bigger than themselves. The arrival of winter in Boston brought more than snow to the grounds of Mass General Hospital. It also brought a wave of changes that no one could have predicted. The success of the hospital partnership program had caught the attention of the international medical community, and now the Martha's Vineyard Research Center was about to become the epicenter of a revolution in pediatric medicine. Skylar was watching the snowflakes fall through the window of her new hospital room, a promotion that still surprised her, when Rachel burst through the door, excited as ever. "You won't believe it," Rachel exclaimed, brandishing a tablet. "The case of the Hopkins twins. The surgery was a complete success. They are crediting the diagnostic imaging system as the deciding factor." "I've seen it," Skylar smiled, pointing to her own computer where the post-op report was open. "Max woke me up at 5 in the morning when he got the news." "Speaking of your favorite billionaire," Rachel raised an eyebrow, "have you told him about the WHO proposal yet?" Skylar sighed, playing with the delicate pendant Max had given her for her last birthday, a small white gold stethoscope. "I haven't found the right time yet." The World Health Organization had invited Skylar to lead a global pilot project, implementing the pediatric technology program in hospitals in developing countries. It was an extraordinary opportunity, but it would mean months of traveling the world. "Sky, you can't put off this conversation forever," Rachel argued gently, "especially considering..." "Considering what?" "Considering everyone notices how you two are getting more and more serious. Madison told me she found Max researching jewelers who specialize in engagement rings." Skylar's heart skipped a beat. Of course, she and Max had discussed the future. It was impossible not to when they were building something so meaningful together, both personally and professionally. But the idea of marriage, especially now with this new opportunity on the horizon. His phone buzzed with a message from Max. "Dinner tonight. I have important news to share." "Talk to him," Rachel insisted, reading the message over Skylar's shoulder. "If there is anyone who will understand the importance of this project, it is Max." The rest of the day passed in a blur of rounds, appointments and meetings with fellow residents. The new diagnostic system was producing impressive results. The survival rate in complex heart surgeries had increased significantly in all participating hospitals. When Skylar finally arrived at the restaurant that night, a little French bistro in Beacon Hill that had become their favorite, she found Max already waiting, looking simultaneously eager and excited. "First of all," he began as soon as she sat down, "I need to show you something." He slid a folder across the table. Inside, Skylar found architectural plans and design proposals. "What is that?" "The next phase," Max explained, her eyes shining with that familiar intensity she associated with her big ideas. "We are expanding the research center, not just on Martha's Vineyard, but globally." Skylar felt her heart speed up. "Globally." "Research and development centers on different continents, starting with areas with the greatest need for advanced pediatric medical technology," he continued. "And I want you to lead the implementation project." "Max," Skylar began, her voice shaking slightly. "Who invited me to lead a similar project?" The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken possibilities. Then, to his surprise, Max smiled. "I know," he admitted. "Catherine told me 2 weeks ago. In fact, that's what inspired this expansion. We can align the projects, create a truly global pediatric medical innovation network. Aren't you upset about the idea of me traveling for months?" Max took her hand from the table, his fingers naturally intertwining with hers. "Skylar, since you broke into my car that rainy night, I've learned that sometimes the best plans are the ones we don't plan. You taught me to see beyond the limits I had created for myself." He paused, taking something out of his jacket pocket, a small blue velvet box that made Skylar's heart stop for a moment. "I didn't plan on falling in love with a resident doctor who criticized my equipment and revolutionized my company," he continued, opening the box to reveal a dazzling yet elegantly simple ring. "But it was the best thing that ever happened to my life. So no, I'm not upset at the idea of you traveling the world saving lives. I'm proud, and hoping you'll agree to do this as my wife." Tears blurred Skylar's vision as Max slipped the ring onto her finger, a delicate solitaire flanked by small sapphires that resembled the color of hospital scrubs. "Yes," she whispered, her voice cracking with emotion. Yes to everything. The rest of the night passed in a whirlwind of planning and shared dreams, not just for their future together, but for the future of global pediatric medicine. Between glasses of champagne and knowing smiles, they outlined a vision that combined the best of both: Skylar's tireless dedication to saving lives and Max's ability to transform ideas into tangible reality. Within a year of their engagement, the Thorne Global Center for Pediatric Innovation had expanded to 3 continents. The WHO pilot project, led by Skylar, transformed the way hospitals around the world approached treating children. But it was on an ordinary morning at Mass General that the true magnitude of their work together became clear. "Dr. Bennett Thorne," a resident called, running down the hall. "We have an urgent video conference from the center in Nairobi." On the monitor, a Kenyan medical team presented the case of a 5-year-old girl with a complex heart condition, exactly the kind of case that, a year earlier, would have been considered hopeless in that region. Now, using the diagnostic system they developed, the local team was planning surgery with an 82% chance of success. "It's amazing to see how it all came together," Max commented later as they walked through the hospital garden. "Their clinical knowledge, our technology, the dedication of these local teams." "Our clinical knowledge," Skylar corrected softly. "You probably know more about pediatric cardiology now than most medical graduates." Max laughed, but his eyes shone with pride. The transformation from businessman focused solely on numbers to someone deeply involved in the human aspect of medicine was one of the many changes their relationship had catalyzed. "Speaking of transformations," he began, guiding her to a familiar bench in the garden, the same one where they had shared so many cups of coffee during long shifts. "I have a surprise for you." "Max, we don't need any more surprises. The center in Mumbai has been enough of a surprise for the year." "This is different," he insisted, handing her an envelope. "Open it." Inside was an ultrasound photo. For a moment, Skylar was confused, until she recognized the letterhead for Boston Children's Hospital and the patient's name: Noah Thompson, now 8 years old. "His follow-up exams?" she asked, studying the image with a clinical eye. "Look closer," Max suggested, his smile growing. The date on the ultrasound was from 3 days ago, and it was not identified as Noah's. In fact, it was marked Baby Bennett Thorne. Skylar felt the air leave her lungs. "Max." "Rachel came to me yesterday," he explained softly. "I said you had taken the test, but you were too nervous to look at the results." Tears blurred her vision as she studied the small form in the image. Her baby, theirs, created by the same love that had inspired so many life-saving innovations. 8 weeks, she whispered, her hand instinctively going to her abdomen. "And you already knew?" "Only since yesterday," he admitted. "I wanted to make this moment special. After all, it was in this very garden that you first explained to me how we could improve the neonatal monitoring system." The sound of footsteps interrupted them. Madison approached, carrying a basket overflowing with blue and pink balloons. "I couldn't decide on the color," she explained with a beaming smile, "so I brought them both." "Did you tell her before I did?" Skylar asked Max, feigning indignation. "Actually, it was Rachel who told me," Madison confessed. "She was so excited she practically shouted the news in the hospital hallway." The 3 laughed, knowing that by the end of the day, the news would have spread throughout the hospital. That's how their extended family worked. A network of people united by a common desire to make a difference in the world. "Have you ever thought," Max mused, his hand finding Skylar's, "that our baby will grow up seeing how medicine can transform lives, surrounded by people dedicated to making the world a better place?" "Like parents," Madison added with a soft smile. That night, during a small, impromptu celebration on the roof of their building, Skylar watched the people who had become her extended family. Rachel was excitedly discussing possible pediatric specialties for the baby with other residents. Dr. Harrison and Catherine were toasting the future of medicine. Madison was practicing dance moves with one of the NICU nurses. "What are you thinking about?" Max asked, hugging her from behind as they watched the city. How one rainy night and a broken umbrella changed everything, she replied, leaning back against him. How sometimes the best moments in life are the unplanned ones. How to break into a stranger's car. How does a reclusive billionaire rediscover his purpose through an exhausted resident? They laughed together, the sound mixing with the soft music and conversations in the background. On the horizon, the lights of Boston twinkled like earthly stars, and somewhere in the city, in a hospital room, monitors developed by their partnership kept children safe at night. You know what else I think? Skylar continued, her hand resting on where her biggest collaboration yet grew. I think about all the lives we changed together, all the families who have hope where there was none before. And the ones we're still going to change, Max added, kissing her temple softly. This is just the beginning, my love. And there, surrounded by people who shared their vision of a better world, Skylar and Max knew they had found something much greater than professional success or romantic love. They had found a shared purpose that would continue to impact lives far beyond their own time. The baby growing inside Skylar was just another chapter in her story of transformation, love, and dedication to healing. A story that began with an accidental meeting on a rainy night and would continue through the countless lives touched by their shared vision of hope and innovation.